Yo, what up, y'all? So I had a good time making an informational video yesterday, and I got a pretty good response, so I decided I'll do another one. And this topic today is closely related, and this topic is called what is narcissism and how narcissism contributes to the slave society. It's a very interesting topic. Most people have a pretty vague general concept of what narcissism is, and it goes back to the Greek mythology of Narcissus and Echo, and it has to deal with a person, a beautiful young man who is so obsessed with his own reflection. I think he starves to death or something like that, looking at his own reflection in the lake or something, something along those lines. And he falls in love with this girl who basically she has what now we would call echolalia, which is the only word she can speak is to repeat what someone else says. So all these Greek myths are super deep, and they're generally revealing a lot about the human psyche, but I'm not going to go too into that. I want to talk more about modern world, how narcissism is used as a tool to control society. And this is something that's been extensively written on by many what I'll consider technocrats. And what a technocrat is a person who uses knowledge and information that's lacked by the common people to manipulate and control society. And that includes economics, culture, science, academia, media, on and on and on. Every facet of society is controlled by technocrats, and they will tell you out and out how exactly what they're doing. But no one wants to read these books, and some of the books that I would refer to would be like Propaganda by blanking out on the guy's name, but he's the nephew of Sigmund Freud. I can't remember the guy's name, but he pretty much coined the modern terminology of propaganda. Edward Bernays, that's his name. So anyways, Edward Bernays and these type of technocrats, people like Jacques Ellul and Theo Adorno and all these people would openly, explicitly describe extensively how they would use human psychology, human perception, and behavior modification and manipulation to control society and shape it exactly according to their whims. And one of the most effective tools that they ever came across was narcissism, because narcissism is like a virus. It's like a mental virus. In my opinion, narcissism is one of the most serious mental illnesses there is. I'm a practicing Buddhist, and as Buddhism, one of the core tenets of Buddhism is called anata, which means the absence of a permanent or independent self, which is to say, in a way, it's a metaphysical principle showing that everything's actually interconnected and that everything's always in flux. Everything that exists is dependent upon all the conditions that surround it. And so most human beings think the opposite. They think of themselves as a permanent, unchangeable thing, that they can have like possessions, that they can own this thing, and that like their identity is like this perfect, unchangeable thing that's completely of their own creation. Like in a way, they believe that they exist in a permanent and self-sustaining way, which is of course not the case. And so to be a narcissist from a Buddhist point of view is equivalent to spiritual hell, because you're completely in a state of ignorance about the actual state of reality, which is that everything's interdependent and everything's in a state of constant flux. So if you're a narcissist from a Buddhist point of view, spiritual progress of any kind is impossible. And then you're constantly going to be in a state of torment and suffering, trying to prop up this impossible ego that can't even exist. And you'll be confronted by the fact that it can't exist, and that it'll never satisfy you to pursue the gratification of this ego. And so when you're in a constant state of torment, it's like an addiction. And no matter how much you try to bolster your ego, you're never going to be satisfied. So basically, and you're always going to want more and more of whatever it is. So now that kind of gets the basics out of the way. So now, how is narcissism used to control society? Well, a narcissist, one of the most interesting and revealing discussions of this is by a guy named Steve Pachinik, who is a psychological warfare expert for the U.S. military, and basically profiles world leaders and politicians and business people, whoever is of interest to these intelligence networks, and uses psychological insights to manipulate and come up with strategies to deal with certain political, underworld, mafia, military figures, and try to find effective ways of dealing with people based on a keen understanding of their psychology. So anyway, what he said is that intelligence agencies and governments love narcissists because they're incredibly easy to manipulate. because a narcissist will always act in accord with what gratifies their ego and with what gratifies their self-image. And based on that, all you have to do is flatter them or make them believe that some certain course of action will somehow deflate their ego or deflate the public perception of their character. And they will never act against that. Now, I think it was Theo Adorno who used the term ego-syntonic. And what ego-syntonic means is pretty much what I just said, which is where you only want the things that tone or stoke up your ego. And you'll avoid everything that causes a reduction in ego. So as you can see, or as you may conclude, this is pretty much the opposite of spiritual growth, because in order to grow, you have to be humble. You have to admit a flaw, and you have to admit limitations on what you're doing and what your abilities are to grow and to learn and to accept instruction or correction from anyone. So an egocentric person is, almost what I was saying about the Buddhist perspective. Spiritual growth is impossible. Self-improvement is impossible. All they can really do is they're completely a slave to their ego. Okay, so now, how is this specifically used to control society? Well, the quickest thing I would point out is how all celebrities are complete fucking narcissists, and especially musicians, and especially famous musicians, okay? You can go all the way back. And all these people, generally, almost every musician you can name ever is a drug addict, number one, probably a sexual pervert of some kind, and probably has deep-seated emotional problems all the way back to childhood. Usually traumatic childhood is a key figure in all these musicians. So now, is that just random, or is there some underlying correlation there? I believe that there is a correlation, and it has to do with the selection process of who's promoted. Now, we look at the media. It's been a big topic of conversation of how the media worldwide is basically controlled by 6 major corporations. Clear Channel is number 1, Disney is number 2. So, Disney controls stuff like all the Star Wars franchise and stuff like that. I mean, people know this. I don't really need to explain that too much. But my point is, the music industry is no different. And this is going all the way back to its inception. So it's controlled by a tiny group of companies. And then within that, who they choose to promote is extremely selective. And in general, it has to deal with what type of social agendas they're willing to promote. Because the thing about narcissists is they super admire other narcissists and they will try to imitate them. And so that's another thing, like I was saying, how narcissism is a virus, is because it's completely self-propagating. For example, let's say you take a common person, like a fanboy or a fangirl, right? And they see someone on stage with the big lights and all the fancy clothes and the jewelry and everything. And they're like, I want to imitate this person. I want to be just like this person. I'm going to imitate how they sing. I'm going to imitate their clothes. I'm going to imitate every aspect of their character. Lo and behold, boom, they're instant narcissists. Now they're probably going to have a drug problem. They're probably going to cultivate and worsen any deep psychological problems that they may already have in the process of merely imitating this other narcissist. Furthermore, their surrogate for spiritual values essentially becomes this narcissistic process where all they really want to do is aggrandize their own fake ego self. So how does this affect society? How does this create a slave society? Well, you take 1 or 2 Katy Perrys out there, or Elvis, or fucking any of these, Jim Morrison, oh my God, he's the worst, okay? Jim Morrison is a terrible human being, okay? He's a drug abuser, alcoholic, terrible poet, one of the worst poets I've ever heard. People think this guy's a fucking genius, dude. Terrible. I've been studying and writing poetry since I was 6 years old. Jim Morrison is a fucking idiot, dude. His songs are stupid, and he doesn't even write most of the songs anyway. But yet people flock to this guy because they put him up on stage, they put a camera on him, they get fashion designers and all these people to tell him what kind of clothes to wear, where to appear, and what to say. Everything that came out of that guy's mouth was a psychological warfare operation. His fucking father and all these hippie 60s people were all tied in the military-industrial complex, and everything that they advanced in terms of social agenda was completely designed to socially engineer society and change the course of the youth. And it completely worked. To this day, all these kids are out there being like, oh, I gotta take LSD, I gotta do some cocaine, I gotta get drunk, I gotta act like a total fucking narcissist so I can be like Jim Morrison. It's fucking terrible. Dude's an idiot, okay? He's not even a good singer. Seriously. Anyway, the point is, you get one narcissist out there, you get your Katy Perrys, you get your Kanye West, oh my fucking God. Talk about a textbook narcissist. Get him out there, everyone starts imitating him. And what do they do now? So now they get into what's called identity politics. everything wraps up around their ego, because they're narcissists. They only want to do what inflates their ego. If anything is perceived as being socially unacceptable or being not in line with whatever politically correct social engineering bullshit, now they will never ever do that. And they're deathly afraid of anything that would compromise their public image. And so now they're completely under control. Anything they put out there on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, anything that's on Kanye's album or whatever, everyone will flock to imitate it. And now, so if you want to go on Instagram and you want to be a social influencer and all this bullshit, now you got to cater to all that. You can't be an individual. There's no way. No one will like you. Narcissists only like and admire other narcissists. So if you act like a narcissist, boom, you've got an instant following of 10,000 people. They're like, wow, this person's really narcissistic. I totally admire them. I love the way they boost their ego with all this fucking bullshit and all their clothes and their fucking memorabilias and all this whatnot. Totally irrelevant to your spiritual development, your creative abilities, etc. Anyway, that's my talk on narcissism. Think about it.